Well, the line from Downing Street and from various government ministers today, all reading from very carefully prepared script, was that the Prime Minister is comfortable. He's working on the red boxes of prime ministerial business from his hospital bed, very much still in charge of the shop. But that's leading people to say, well, how can he both be taking up a hospital bed at a time like this and capable of running the country? There are other sort of confusions around as well. For a long time, the line about the Prime Minister's condition has been that he is suffering from mild symptoms. Today, that wasn't repeated by spokespeople for the government, and they were talking about persistent symptoms. And that symptoms, by the way, use of plural, that actually knocks out something that the Prime Minister was saying only recently in a video broadcast when he said he just had a little bit of a temperature now, implying that the cough had gone. None of this seems to quite add up, and it's possible that it is just the natural protective air of Number 10 not wanting to make the Prime Minister look weak or incapacitated at a time of crisis. But on top of this as well, we have a situation where Dominic Raab, the Foreign Secretary, is deputing for the Prime Minister, chairing a committee today, but he doesn't seem to have spoken to the Prime Minister, and that doesn't seem to be entirely normal. So it's churning a lot of questions around, and I suppose one of the other questions tonight is we don't actually know whether the Prime Minister is going to be discharged. It's quite possible that we are looking at his second night in hospital.
Waiting to catch a glimpse of the inpatient. Boris Johnson spent the night in St Thomas's Hospital across Westminster Bridge from Parliament. He was driven there Saturday night just as 23 million viewers across all channels tuned in to watch the Queen's address to the nation.
From Her Majesty the Queen. Majesty the Queen.
Now from Her Majesty the Queen.
The Foreign Secretary Dominic Raab stood in for the Prime Minister, chairing the COVID-19 meeting this morning. But Number 10 insisted Boris Johnson was still at work in hospital and in charge.
I can tell you the PM had a comfortable night in hospital and he's in good spirits. He's still in hospital under observation. He's been given regular updates on developments and he continues to lead the government.
The Chief Medical Officer, himself making his first public appearance after time off sick with COVID-19, was asked if the Prime Minister might have pneumonia.
I can give a general answer, which is the majority, the clear majority of people who do end up going to hospital, or they end up going into a general bed. They may or may not need oxygen and other things, and they don't need to go further than that. But that is absolutely not a comment on his personal situation, which would be completely inappropriate for me to comment on. It's just a general comment on how things tend to progress in hospital.
Shifting language in Downing Street about Boris Johnson's actual condition has fed questions ever since he first said he'd got COVID-19.
I've developed mild symptoms of the coronavirus.
Mild symptoms became the Downing Street briefing mantra, but not today, when Number 10 dropped it in favour of persistent symptoms. Last week he was shown chairing a COVID committee and cabinet, both from isolation, all intended to show he was still doing the job.
Although I am sequestered here in Number 10 Downing Street.
And he was seen coming out the door to clap the NHS on Thursday night. On Friday, he pronounced himself well on the way to recovery with only one minor symptom, a temperature.
Alas, I still have one of the symptoms, a minor symptom of I still have a temperature. And so
but Number 10 today said he also still had a cough, the other main symptom.
His doctor advised him to go into hospital as a precaution to have these routine tests. He stayed overnight and will be having them today.
Did he look like a man who actually had mild symptoms? I've spoken to people who watched him in video conference and said he looked like he'd got it, quotes, very badly.
Well, it's difficult for me to judge because I have spoken to him every few days, but it's always been via video conference.
Robert Jenrick said he'd been speaking to councils today, urging them not to repeat yesterday's locking up of some parks.
I've asked councils to behave sensibly and exercise their powers judiciously. Only consider closing parks in the most extreme circumstances where it's proving impossible to follow or to enforce the social distancing rules.
This South London park was reopened today to the relief of many.
Like yesterday they closed it and I found it a bit not fair.
If we want to kind of keep it open like it is today, everyone's got to be responsible with how they're kind of using it.
People need to not have barbecues in the park, don't they? They need to leave it for like children and families and people that don't have gardens, basically.
Police testing a drone to monitor social distancing. And Westminster now has a new opposition team watching Boris Johnson's government. Labour's new leader, Keir Starmer, has announced his shadow cabinet. Of those who went into the last election on Jeremy Corbyn's shadow cabinet team, 17 have now gone. Some stood down, many of them asked to go by the new leader. One of those dismissed called it bad politics. There is a front bench role for the leader who preceded Jeremy Corbyn. Ed Miliband will shadow the business and energy brief. Across the Thames, the Prime Minister lies in a hospital bed, insisting he is still running the government. While COVID-19 throws up challenges no peacetime predecessor has known.